What's going on, everybody? How are you today? My name is Josh Markowitz, and today we're here in the Yahoo Sports headquarters. But today we are joined by a former NXT North American champion, a former Impact X Division champion, and a former MLW Southern State champion, and in my opinion, one of the most accomplished independent wrestlers of his generation. If you want to talk about been there and done that when it comes to professional wrestling, I think you're going to talk about this guy. He is the MLW star, Trevor Lee. Trevor, how you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Josh. Yeah.
Of course, man. I'm excited to chat, and I really have been wanting to get this interview done and to have a quick chat with you because I know you have an interesting story. Because most people watch their heroes on TV, right? For me, it was Rey Mysterio, and I always got to watch him on TV when I was a kid. However, if the stories are true, your heroes you were actually watching from your bedroom window. I'm hearing you have some neighbors that maybe are a little famous.
Yeah. So grew up Cameron, North Carolina. So I actually lived with my grandmother who lived next door to the Hardy Boys. So definitely influential in my career. My father also, wrestled with those guys when they were kind of jumping on the trampoline in their front yard. So quite a bit of history between us.
Yeah, I'm sure that is. Those are probably the coolest neighbors you can have. And are there any? Did you guys ever have any counters, or was this? Were you a wrestling fan? I'm assuming with your father, you were a wrestling fan growing up.
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, like I kind of mentioned, my father was wrestling with Matt and Jeff when they were on the trampoline. So then, when a mega championship wrestling, a promotion that Matt and my father kind of helped start, happened. So I was at all those shows as a toddler, as a baby. Very first steps were probably in a wrestling ring. So, I've always been a fan. So it's been tough.
That's great. And so, take me back to the moment when you kind of realized that professional wrestling is really what you want to do for a living, and when you realized that your dream could become a reality.
Yeah, so I kind of got away from wrestling. I'd say around maybe like the early 2000s. Just at that age period, I just didn't think it was cool anymore. Then around like 13 years old to about 2007, I kind of started getting back on to watching wrestling again, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then my father ended up running a show at my high school that I was going to be going to the next year, and I got to see independent wrestling for the first time again, as now a teenager and not just like a toddler. And it was so cool. I was so enthralled by it that I was just like, I think this is what's going to be it. I was kind of a troubled youth. I was kind of getting in a lot of trouble at school, mostly just because, I wanted some kind of attention. So I did that with physicality, which probably wasn't the best thing to do. I got a lot of trouble. I got a lot of out of school suspension, a lot of in school suspension. But then as soon as I got into pro wrestling training again at 14 years old, it kind of cleaned me up and kind of put me on a better path, thankfully, right?
That's great. It's so
Yeah.
funny how getting into wrestling, getting into something that is physical and you are, beating someone else up actually cleans you up in real life, in reality. It's a funny contrast. And so
Right, right,
you
right.
talk about, starting wrestling up in 2007. So 2014 and 2019 you wrestled with PWG, who I mean this was the golden era of PWG in my opinion. You had the American Legion Hall and, a crowd of about 250 people creating this intimate yet electrifying atmosphere. And I always go back and watch these shows on YouTube. I mean, it's incredible. So I want to know on a PWG show day, was there a different feeling in the air compared to, other independent shows? Did you know when you woke up that morning that, you're heading to something special?
For sure. And those days were very long. Like a lot of people think like when you're traveling that you're in these towns maybe for longer than you are, but it would be a very long day. So I was in North Carolina and these shows were happening in Reseda, California. So every one of those show days would start with me waking up, flying out of Raleigh, Durham, and then going to Los Angeles. So, that's a 4 a.m. flight for 6 hours, right? Then you get off the flight and now you're in California and you still have the whole day to go before the show. So, you probably get in around 10 a.m. And you're in a completely different side of the world, right? So you're tired, you're already wore out, but you know that you're going to a place where, like you said, it was the golden era of these guys. Everybody that was on the shows, you can follow their careers, and it's pretty impressive how they've all turned out. So then, you'd head to the building around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is in the valley of the California. This is hot. These are 100-degree, just no wind, and it would be 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and there would already be a line outside of the door to that little bitty building, like you said, and these people would be pre-gaming already, like getting ready, getting excited. So like, they're building that anticipation, and then now you go inside this building, and there's still another 8 hours that you have to wait before the show starts, and no air conditioning and 110 degrees. But again, it's the best wrestlers in the world that are in this building that are all sharing this experience. Uh, so when you finally got to have the show start, like everybody was excited to see what everybody had kind of been planning to bring to the night. So it was very exciting and very fun. And when those shows would end, then you'd go right back to get ready to go to the airport and fly all the way cross country again. So like these were, 19, 24-hour days easily of just like constant nonstop. And it was really cool though.
So looking back on it, you talk 19 and 24-hour days, the nitty gritty, the ring, no air conditioning. Was it all worth it for PWG?
Definitely. I mean, it definitely, it was the slingshot that launched me forward into my career at the time. Before PWG, I was, trying to do tryouts for Ring of Honor. I was just trying to like get on anything that where I could showcase myself because, I was, I think, 18 or 19 at the time. So, I was just trying to get out there and I was still kind of also looking like a child. So it's hard to compete when you look like a child in a grown man's sport. So I was just trying my hardest, but, I got a shot with PWG and then from that point on, I was, being flown all over the world.
Totally, yeah. And so you talk a lot about, getting shots and kind of just going places, driving places. Sometimes you don't even know if you're going to be booked. You just drive right to a place, 10 hours away to see if you can do ring crew. So the business is super unpredictable, of course. And I'm wondering if you can take me back to a time where the business was unpredictable for your career, whether it's positively or negatively.
Yeah, I definitely would have said, the most recent would probably be a few years ago when I, lost my job at WWE. That definitely put me in a, okay, now where do I go? And I spent some time on the independents, traveling around, going back to the ground roots, and then I found a place with MLW that seemed like a good fit for me. And about what we were about 6 or 7 months now that I've been kind of working with MLW, and we see that they're giving me good matchups that I think that, can help showcase me and good opportunities with that, sending down to CMLL. We also have a partnership with Stardom. I don't expect to see me in Stardom, but you never know, right? But this weekend on MLW Fusion, we have me and Matt Riddle. So like, that's another big time matchup that should be pretty big, with some big implications on the other side of that. So, I would probably answer it with that.
100%. Yeah. And you mentioned, wrestling all over the world. But when I look back at, your recorded matches, Japan seems like the one place that's been missing from the resume. Has that been bad timing, bad luck, or is there a story there?
Yeah, a little bad timing, really. Right at the time when I got the opportunity to work for TNA, I had an opportunity to go wrestle for Dragon Gate. Um, but the way it timed out was like Dragon Gate would have wanted me there for like 3 or 4 months. And I was also getting the opportunity to go work for TNA. So it's like, do I stay in the States and work for a television company and get that experience? Or do I take the chance to go to Japan and, kind of do that experience? And yeah, I really would love to go wrestle in Japan. I think that I would do very well in Japan. It's just been a timing thing, right? Like, maybe one day it will happen, right? Like the careers are definitely long, and we do have partnerships with New Japan, so hopefully something does work out like that.
Yeah, I know. I can say I would love to see a New Japan. I think I think stylistically you match up very well with a lot of the best talents in Japan. And I think with traveling a lot in throughout the world also comes with developing relationships. And fans only see what happens between the ropes, but as a performer, you live and breathe this business. So looking back on your career, what are some of the friendships that you've made along the way? And are there any friendships that maybe you feel like have lasted longer than maybe you expected?
Yeah, definitely. I think my number one friendship, I think, when I would want to answer this question would be DJZ, Zima Ion, Joaquin Wild, all the same person, right? But the first day that I worked for TNA, I remember just kind of meeting him, and in the first kind of time that we met each other, I don't think we stopped talking to each other for like 2.5 hours, and then that was only because like we had to like go throw something away, and then we came right back to just talking all day.
Uh,
And ever since that moment, like our careers have kind of like crossed paths in some kind of way. Um, but I would definitely say he's probably the number one guy that I still talk to this day, still can reach out to. We both have baby girls now, so that's fun and that's cool. But yeah, definitely Michael Paris would be that number one guy.
how is being a girl dad?
Yeah, it's great. So I'm about 2.5 months into the process, but each day gets incredibly better, right? Like the more she starts to learn how to smile, like it's just breaking me down. I'm supposed to be a tough guy, but it's not gonna be that way around her.
Right. Well, congratulations. I know that's
Of course,
it
thank you.
gives life more meaning, of course. And I want to kind of transition into the time at WWE. So you go from Trevor Lee to Cameron Grimes. Did you like Cameron Grimes originally, and how did the name come about?
I don't know if I was sure about the character Cameron Grimes at first. And the name came about because they were doing the breakout tournament, where I made my debut with the breakout tournament. So they were putting a lot of people on TV at one time, which was kind of rare at that time. That was when it was still the black and gold brand, so it kind of had like the same kind of talent roster, and to get on the show was kind of hard at that time. So they were putting a lot of people on TV very quickly, so they just needed names quickly within like a weekend. So it really just was a name that kind of got thrown on me, and I was like, hey, whatever, it gets me on TV, I'll be Cameron Grimes. So then I tried to like make it fancy by just saying Cameron Grimes like in a kind of crazy way, and then kind of from that, the character kind of evolved into what we saw it become.
100%. And you get so then not only do you get released from a contract, but you get released from the name. So you're now Trevor Lee again. I want to ask, Trevor Lee is reborn again now in MLW and across the world on the independent scene. What was the best part of the rebirth of Trevor Lee that you feel like maybe you missed mostly while you were in WWE?
I think the best part is just like the ability to just kind of like do exactly whatever I want, right? Like I kind of now get to choose my path. I get to kind of have the matches that I want to have. You know, like some of the promoters, the independent promoters will say you only have 10 minutes, but I can do 20 now. And like, what, you're not gonna, yeah, maybe that's not the nicest thing, but if I'm having a good connection with this guy, what I mean, this is a one-time matchup type of thing. Like, let's take advantage of it in the situation where on TV you don't really get that, that luxury. Um, but it's cool to be able to just kind of be myself again, right? Just kind of be Trevor Lee. Uh, and just kind of do, like I said, what kind of got me there, and that's kind of grind out these little buildings and these little small towns, and just kind of like see like the true like working class, right? And actually get to socialize with them. Where in WWE you don't get that, right? And that's another cool thing about MLW is that like every show we have an affordable meet and greet where you can meet any of us, right? And you can have a conversation with us, and for to do that, and WWE or a bigger company, you gotta drop a pretty big penny to be able to even get that experience for just a few seconds. It's a handshake and a picture. So it's cool to be able to just kind of get to socialize with people again.
100%. And I want to ask your opinion on obviously, it seems as if now WWE has been, increasing their ticket prices and a lot of meet and greet prices, stuff along those lines. I want to ask you your opinion on all of that and, wrestling not maybe not being affordable for some people, especially, WWE.
Yeah, it's just like an unfortunate situation, right? Companies are publicly traded. Like, Target has to raise their prices when stuff affects their prices. So like, there's factors that affect these things. Does it suck for the consumer? Yes. Uh, the good thing is that professional wrestling isn't monopolized completely, right? So you do have your other options, your more affordable options. Like I said, MLW, I believe, is $15 ticket prices. Like that's pretty good. As that the regular consumer can kind of afford those. And you can kind of check us out, and you get to see a lot of good stuff in that price. So You just kind of got to find other options, right?
100%. And so you pretty much just answered it, but what is so special about MLW in your opinion? Now, you mentioned flexibility and of course affordability and being able to have conversations with people, and it's more humanizing, I guess, in a way, to develop friendships. But what is so special about MLW in your opinion, and why should all these consumers choose to be watching MLW versus all the other wrestling companies in the world?
Yeah, so I think like when I think of for me personally, I think like MLW is a great opportunity to be able to showcase how I feel I'm best presented, how I can do the best for what I think I can do. And that's just me. There's a whole other crop of guys that have that exact same feeling as me that want to be able to showcase it just like that. So when you have that many guys that are working to make themselves look that good, then it's going to show off in that product. And right now we have a good group of talent that are excited to be there and are excited to show something off. And with the opportunity now of every week it being free on YouTube, that's a great opportunity for people to just grab a clip from something and go, "Wow, this was really cool." And that's how the conversation starts, right? Or with professional wrestling now, right? Uh, it starts with a clip, like just a small clip can grow into something so huge. And that's just kind of, what we have the ability to do now with putting this out every week and having guys that are wanting to put out good content. So it's exciting to see what the possibilities are, right?
Yeah, and you said it yourself, MLW is stacked. It's affordable. Like you said, it's free on YouTube. You don't always get to see the top of the tier professional wrestling for free on YouTube. And that is the beauty of MLW, in my opinion. I mean, you guys are fresh off of 3 days in a row, New York City, and then two tapings in a row in Philly in the former ECW arena. I was at the New York City taping. It was incredible. And I want to ask, for you, how were those shows? Philly or New York City, which crowd was hotter? I'm a Philly kid, so I will be a little biased towards the whole ECW arena, the hardcore fans, but I want to ask your opinion on it.
Yeah. So if I'm going to go for who won the weekend, I would maybe say Philly, just because it's a little bit bigger of a venue.
Mm.
But the Melrose Ballroom has a cool feel where everybody's kind of right on top of the ring, so it gives you a little bit different of a feeling. When it comes to temperature wise, the Melrose Ballroom was definitely hotter. uh, but the Philly crowd was great as well, and for 2 nights of back-to-back shows, they were in there with us the whole time, so it was really cool. And like you said, that New York City crowd, we had the CMLL. Uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Not reference, but the CMLL. I don't know, but they were being represented right
Hmm.
very well with Mystico, Sabanero Jr., Templaro, and that NYC crowd really loves those guys. So they were rowdy in there for them. It was great. It was a good time.
Yeah, and so you talked obviously about MLW being stacked now, and yes, it is. So, you've wrestled over 900 recorded matches in your career, and we have talent from everywhere in that locker room, every part of this world. Who do you want to go to toe with in this locker room?
That's a good question. So I believe that this match for Matt Riddle, like I said a little earlier in the interview, has big implications, right? Matt Riddle, I believe a former MLW champion. I believe so.
Hmm.
Uh, so, whoever wins this does have a good opportunity to wrestle, our current champion, Karrion Cross. And, uh, you referenced having a pretty good data of my matches. I think me and Cross have only wrestled maybe one time. So it would be cool to see, as our careers have grown, how that could match up again, right? Uh, as far as any of the CMLL guys, every one of those guys are just absolutely incredible and have just an incredible uh, representation every single time they're there. Um, Also, any of the New Japan guys, these are all first time matchups for me. So, like, that's always a fun thing. Coming into this, uh, Austin Aries was a first time matchup for me, but I think as we're seeing, maybe we'll get a couple more out of that because first time matchups sometimes you find out people have good chemistry. So really, it's just keep bringing on these first time matchups. Like you said, over 900 matches. I believe that could be even a little hid. There's a lot of small town
Mm.
shows in North Carolina that I don't
Oh
think Cage Match picks up, right?
yeah. Probably
Um,
not.
so I might have broke 1,000 out, maybe, right?
I'm
Training
sure.
matches, right? So anytime that you can get a first time match in a statistic that high, right? Like it's exciting. And MLW's managing to be able to put that out pretty consistently for me. So that's fun.
Yeah, and so you've shared the ring with the likes of Will Ospreay, Rey Mysterio, Gunther, the Young Bucks, people like that. Of course, Karrion Kross, Riddle. The list goes on, really. So those are some of the greatest professional wrestlers to ever lace up the boots. But now that you're here in both MLW and also wrestling on the independent scene here and there, I gotta ask, who is someone that you have wrestled that you believe either never got the recognition they deserved or is just underrated in general?
That's a good question. Oh man. Oh man. Well, I would say this as well. The friend question earlier you mentioned. I think Joaquin Wild could kind of go for that as well. He's kind of underrated and how consistent and how long he's been innovating and doing the stuff that he's been doing. I think you could say that he's definitely underrated. Uh, I mean, everybody knows the character. Everyone knows the character Hurricane, but I believe that Shane Helms is definitely a guy that is has been completely underrated. There was actually one time at a bar. It was me, Shane Helms, and Ric Flair. And Ric Flair turned to Shane Helms and said, "You were just as good as Shawn Michaels." And I was the only person to hear that with Shane. And he was like, "You hear that? You hear that? Make sure you heard that." So so he knows that he's good, but I definitely feel like he's underrated as well. So I'll just leave it at those two.
That was an incredible story, and that's also an incredible Shane Helms impression you got there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we talked about, you just said, underrated wrestlers. I want to ask, you have wrestled all over the world. There's obviously Japan, there's Mexico, there's America, there's these big crowds. But you've also wrestled in some pretty unique places. Is there anywhere in the world that maybe you think a city or a country flies under the radar?
Yeah, I think that everyone knows that North Carolina was a big place to wrestle in the late '80s, early '90s. I think everyone knew that that was a good hotbed to be at. I think here in the 2020s that maybe not everybody knows that, but I still believe that Greensboro, Charlotte, Raleigh still a good town. Um, but if we're going underrated, right? Chicago. There's a lot of good little small towns in Chicago that do very well. But again, when the big shows come to these places, you see how well they are, right? So it's not underrated. Uh, it'd probably have to be with Reseda, California would probably be like the most underrated. But if you know ball, you know how overrated it was. Yeah,
You're right.
right,
It seems like when you're talking about independent wrestling, all roads lead back to Reseda.
right, right.
It really was such a unique time in independent wrestling. And so I want to end on this. Finally, what's next for Trevor Lee, right? You're here in MLW. We've just seen the re-debut of Fusion. You guys are fresh off three sold out TV tapings, New York, Philly. So where to now? Where can we see Trevor Lee and what is he aspiring to achieve on this run that you're on right now?
Yeah, so I think what's next for not MLW, but for me in MLW is kind of, seeing what we can do. I said I want to accomplish something. So in this business, how you accomplish something is you win a championship, right? So, that's the goal, right? To become a champion in MLW. So we're going to see, if that's on the cards for us. And that definitely comes after this Matt Riddle match, right? Hopefully it's a heavyweight title. There's a middleweight title. There's a new Southern Crown title. So it's interesting to see where that goes. So, I can't predict the future, but let's hope that it leads to something like that.
I think it's pretty safe to say you'll be holding one of those belts real soon. So Trevor, I really appreciate the time. This was a great conversation. I had a lot of fun, and yeah, everyone make sure to tune in to MLW Fusion, of course. Pay-per-views free on YouTube, like Trevor said. Come on, guys, it's free. No reason not to tune in, watch a match or two, and then of course end up staying for the whole event. Trevor, thank you so much, man. This was great.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank
Of
you.
course.